Hi, welcome. My name is Dale McCluskey. In this video, I'm going to be discussing the role of influence as it relates to a process. Again, comparing and contrasting the learning-based approach by way of the role of influence, by way, again, of changing the perceptions of dogs. Again, once a relationship problem is already underway, once a dog has gained a level of control in the relationship, and once, again, control is starting to manifest itself in various ways by way of how it's being expressed by way of dog's state of mind. Now, these are the words, again, you will not hear those who identify as force-free and balanced dog trainers even talk about, okay? You're not going to see that in terms of, again, what I call stinking thinking, okay? We'll talk about that in terms of being dialed into the relationship the right way. So again, this again plays into the role of influence by way of interrupting and intercepting, okay, these states of mind as they're being expressed, considering that you're in the middle of a relationship problem, okay? So again, I talk about how it is in terms of, dogs gaining control in a relationship, how it is that everything starts to be perceived as a type of supply source, okay? In fact, you'll see it, you pay attention, you'll see the dog's head starting to pivot, especially when brought under intentional control, okay? What happens is you'll see a level of desperation, okay, happen where the dog is going to be even more, starting to fixate and focus even harder and faster. And again, interesting because, again, dog owners will tell me, well, Dale, after you left the session, once they start to interact, well, guess what happened? The dog became more desperate during the next few days, because you don't have to fight over that which you're already in control of. Okay, think about that. Why would you have to? But once again, dogs are amazing animals. Once they understand that, hey, there's a different vibe happening here. The owner is engaged. There's like a parent moving into a different parenting style, starting to get in the child's airspace differently. Where are you going? Who are you hanging out with, right? There's a pushback. But you'll see with dogs is there's a desperation. They'll get desperate. They'll get more intense on being possessive of certain things, getting more nasty. That shows you. That's when you have to bring, again, more, and they'll tell you have to bring more structure into the equation by way of the crate. And again, in terms of freedom, okay, you're going to curtail the freedom that way because everything is a supply source. So again, just bear that in mind, again, as you're engaging this way. When you're bringing the core ingredients into the equation by way of influence and control, you see that desperation. And then again, it's not just about management. We'll talk about this here, managing a problem anymore. It's about change. So understand structure provides the aspect of control, but change comes through the method itself by way, again, how you're interacting with, how you're intercepting and interrupting these moments. Again, in terms of, again, typically it takes the form of a nudge, okay? So, or the push-pull, expressed through the push-pull. And so again, how influence comes into the equation by way of, again, how you're interacting with, okay? Relationship, okay? Expressed that way. Again, consider the parenting example, parental influence, all right? How is it defined? How is it through the parenting style itself, okay? By way of how a parent is interacting with. Okay, so understand all the same themes you hear me talk about through the system, you just consider the parenting example. It's the same themes by way of the authoritative parenting style, interacting with, okay? So structure, right? You got to ground the child. And so all those things all line up the same way. So here we're going to go through this because, again, this is a very important discussion point. What's the role of influence? Because it's going to be very challenging, especially if you're aligned up with this idea that training's a learning-based exercise. Once a relationship problem is underway, see, that changes everything. So here, again, understand through learning, right, what's the focus on? It's on the physical. It's not on, again, when I talk about mind and body, it's at a physical level. So the jumping off point is to, motivate a response, okay? But again, once you understand that, hey, you're dealing with a dog relationship problem, a dog is gaining control in the relationship and it's manifesting. Consider the selfish child example. It makes sense as a child is getting more and more selfish, it's being expressed, okay? It contaminates everything. A selfish child walks into whatever environment, everything becomes a supply source. Think of a narcissistic person, very narcissistic. They devalue, right? They're everything, they think different. It's that stinking thinking I'm talking about. So, but for a child, again, this plays into for a narcissistic adult, how's change happen? Well, but for a child's becoming selfish, maybe head in that direction, the parent's role is absolutely critical, okay, to advocate. So again, when a selfish child goes into a certain environment, they walk in and, if they're heavily absorbed into, say, video games, there could be, other kids their age playing with toys. They're not interested. They want to go right into that. Thing becomes a supply source. They want to invest in that thing. Or if that's not there, they want to start to, they want to share, right? It's like it contaminates everything. They have no respect for the parent, especially if the parent brings them under a level of a demand. Okay, understand? See, but versus what? Bribery and motivate. So think about this whole thing about the jumping in point here. I talk about bribery, motivating response, and then not dialed in and not focused at all, or even interested, okay, in making that connection. But that changes the role of influence, okay, in terms of stinking thinking, okay? We'll talk about this. So here, now, getting back to it. So learning is at the physical level, the only focus on a response, marking those, behaviors, right? Again, that doesn't fit, the word doesn't fit. We talked about that. So for force free, okay, understand that because their whole focus is on at the physical level that way, okay, they totally just don't even consider in terms of being dialed into the dog's state of mind. So you'll have those express states happening, you'll have things getting out of control, and they will do everything except interrupt those states. So what they'll do is, the big focus here is, and you'll see this theme in Force Free, is simply trying to change the focus. Okay, this is why if you watch a video of a guy like Zach George, he's just pumping the treats, right? He's, there's a video of, of a dog that is heavily invested in, traffic, cars going by. It's manifesting and control, and this dog's just lunging forward. And Zach George got, pulling basically just trying to pump those treats out. Not about, what's the right way is intercepting, right? Nudging and then turning even. I talk about that in terms of, again, if you watch the Jeff Gellman Bonker video, I talk about, what that looks like, what that should look like, okay? But Zach George is pumping those treats, right? Trying to change the focus. But understand, it's an expressed state of mind. Control is manifesting. So what's the right way? Nudging, intercepting, interrupting. Now, this is where you get into this thing about intent, okay? Again, being proactive. So again, understand that the sooner you, okay, interrupt and intercept, just as the head's turning, the more successful you're going to be, the more agreeable the dog's going to be, the more sense it's going to make, because the dog will understand the intent. Okay, so this thing about intent, talking about, because we'll talk about this through balance, about correction, cherry picking certain moments at a certain point, but it's delayed, okay? It's not dialed in the right way. We'll talk about that, it makes a tremendous difference, okay? Understand, so taking the form of a nudge, okay? So again, and then the moments that play off of that, what you see is in a tangible way. Pay attention to the videos I put out. You see the dog's head starting to turn in towards, as you're nudging, starting to turn in towards, okay, the dog owner or the trainer, right? That's how it sets up those moments. Okay, moments of agreeableness. This is what I call fading in, right? So the head starting to turn in. The dog doesn't have to be looking up in your eyes. You'll see the head start to turn in. Moments of relaxation starting to happen. Now for higher levels, okay, you'll see me, instead of the nudging, because the nudging may not work, you'll see me apply influence, intentional control, the baseline, and influence. And what I'm doing is, I call it kinetic, but you're breaking that contact, okay, at a certain point. It's like it'll create like a little mini earthquake, little tremor. You'll see that. That's that moment of disconnection. That's the moment that influence is affecting the mind. Okay, it's breaking that type of control manifest in that fixation, those fixation levels. As it go up and up and up, it gets very uncomfortable to the dogs around. It's just how it is, and it's just like, and then the head will turn towards, and then you take a little bit off. Okay, it's like dog gives, you give, but just ever so much, because understand you have to keep that baseline. For some dogs, you have to keep that intentional control at a level so that when you're working this method, okay, it just moves. Then it moves up ever so much. Because if that baseline ain't right, then it's going to be jerky. It's going to be disconnect. It's not going to be, and it's going to cause more conflict. Okay, more disagreeableness. So it's part of the method as you work it. So I just mentioned that. Okay, but there's two ways. Okay, tapping can work depending on where you're at. But for some dogs, you can move from that type of pressure and then to nudging. Okay, it's how that transitions over. But all to say that do force free, what you'll see is a heavy investment into just trying to change the dog's focus. Okay, they're using treats to do it. You watch the Zach George video, and then they're trying to. What they do is when there is a moment, okay, and with using treats or the dog is just has a moment of shifting focus for a second, they're like all in it. Good boy. They're trying to find a baseline. They're saying they're trying to frame that up like, oh, that's a great moment. That's a moment to. No, it's not. Okay, the dogs. It's that stinking thinking. Even a selfish child. I mean, they're not gonna mouth off. I mean, at a parent, like there's gonna be a little delay for a second. They're catching their breath. Okay, it's like they have no respect for you. But then it's like it'd be like saying, yeah, it's ridiculous. But see, that's the whole thing. It's like, when you get into this level of trying to find a way, right? They're trying because their ideology is that they're totally invested in the superficial appearance-based idea of things, so they're not connecting dots that way. So, and then you'll see it through, okay? Because here's the thing. Here's the collateral damage of it, okay? Through force free, you'll see highly engaged in managing a problem. So you'll be locked in forever with managing a problem until something bad happens. You're never going to be truly happy in the relationship. You're never going to overcome a relationship problem. You're just going to be, walking on eggshells. You're going to be avoiding situations. There's all of that. Okay, that's the result. And people will buy into it. Understand, because again, I talked about this before. So emotionally compromised, right? That they have such a fear of that. They can't work through reactions of dogs. They're so sold out to the stuff that they'll rather just accept it than change it, and they build a world for the dog to fit into. I mean, just like a very permissive parent can build a world for a selfish child to fit into, but then the reality of the world, okay, sooner or later something bad's going to happen, because when that selfish child steps out into the world, they're going to be in conflict, right, with peers, with authority figures. See, it's the same thing. So dogs as social animals, yeah, you can do that, but you're going to get trampled, okay? Someone else generally will take the hit. Someone else will get bitten, right? So here, and then the blame shifting at a higher level, okay? So this is where you get, I talk about this, blaming dogs is going to be at even a higher level than balance, but it's still going to be part of the balance part of it. Okay, we'll talk about that. It's still going to be there. So balance, again, okay, let's talk about balance. Influence is brought in by way of what's called the 4 quadrants. Okay, 2 of those quadrants by way of a negative to try to do what? Firm up response. Again, we talk about we're at a physical, right? What's the focus with force-free balance? Physical, right? Physical level. So they'll bring in a negative to try to secure and firm up this already inherently problematic, okay, approach. Because again, it's those core ingredients I talk about in influence and control. They're not coming in the right way, at the right level, by way of a interaction base. So this does not follow a path of a intervention. Okay, that way it does not bring them in at the right level, the right way. So therefore, that door is completely wide open for perceptive dogs not to change. And then they'll bring in, again, negatives brought in to firm up those responses, but the problem starts at the beginning. Okay, the core tenet's flawed. Okay, by way of how this idea is applied, by way of motivating dogs that way at the very beginning and focusing on just physical response, okay? So they're bringing a negative here, and then, again, balanced dog trainers, and then what happens is, again, this brings the confusion in because this is why they'll do the same thing with a lot of the methods, like using treats to change the focus of the dog. Okay, you'll see that intermix of that, okay? It's like they're connected that way. Both of these, because it follows the same principle of approaching training to learning-based exercise. So there's confusion as to the role of influence. So they'll engage this way too. This is why certain concepts such as counter-conditioning, behavioral adjustment training, oh yeah, we use clickers. Think about that. Oh, we use treats, right? Why do they sound just like force-free dog trainers? There's a reason for that, because both these groups approach it as a learning-based exercise. But so it generates the same problems, right? Because they're saying, this is why some trainers say, oh, and you hear some balanced trainers, rewarding bad behavior to create good behavior. I talk about that in my video. Go watch the video on that. It'd be like, you know, a selfish child mouthing off, and then you pull a chocolate bar out and pull it to the side, and what's that do? Change the focus, right? Change the focus. And then, oh, you know, it's like, same as Zach George, change the focus. But that's the problem. It's like, okay, what is the role of influence, right? It's to intercept, interrupt, controls manifesting. So, but again, when you do that, what's happening? Okay, perception of dogs aren't going to be changing the right way. The overall decision-making process of the dog. And then again, so when you get into the issue about using a correction now, because balanced dog trainers will correct the dog as controls manifesting, you know, and again, pay attention at a higher level. They'll cherry pick those moments, and they'll correct the dog in those moments. But because again, the role of influence is such, okay, that in terms of the stinking thinking, the proactive nature, in terms of just as, right, in terms of engaging at that level, because it's delayed, it's not lining up, and then they're playing off of this again, changing the focus of the dog at the same time during other moments, and they're focused on the physical as well. This physical, what happens is inherent to this idea is it opens that door completely wide open to perceptive dogs not changing. Okay, either not changing at all, or again through balanced dog training, talk about that. Change will and can happen. Again, you add that the other equation, and I mentioned in the other video with the individual totality relationship, you got that too. The social need of the dog, you have to add that in. But ultimately, understand this is an open door now. Okay, understand as soon as you approach trains of learn-based exercise, okay, you're allowing that door to open up, all right, to problems, okay, including perception. This is why, in the end, you get into the same result, and you go watch the videos of all these balanced dog trainers. They're having the same conversation as forestry trainers as when to euthanize the dog for behavioral issues. Okay, it's the same conversation. It's the out, right? Now, don't get me wrong, I talk about, this, we'll get to this in a second, interaction-based method. It could be the most challenging thing you've ever done, okay? I'm not saying this is easy, but, in terms of, again, the blame shifting part, what's happening here through, this idea, learning-based, dog owners don't even have a chance to be successful even if they wanted to at the very start, right? Just think about that. I tell people, if you're gonna fail, at least fail standing up on your own 2 feet, getting the right information. So if you're failing, it's not because you don't have the right information. And don't get me wrong, I don't wanna see anyone fail. But at least, okay, you have every chance in the world, you can do it. I encourage people all the time. I'm not saying it's easy, but it can be done because the right ingredients are there the right way. Not being led into believing things that aren't true, whether intentional or not, okay? And then how this sets up change through the role of influence, okay? So again, we get into the role of influence. So again, to understand, this is the thing, we talk about correcting a dog, right? It's delayed, right? That's a problem because then look at the Tom Davis video, what can happen if you watch watch those interplays between allowing the dog to express control and then, see the moment because he's focused on the physical. If you in that video alone, watch the Tom Davis video, I talk about that. He's totally physically focused on just a sit. That dog's head spinning, investing on it, you can see it, and then he's letting the dog give him a tug. It's setting, it's like all the dominoes are falling, like towards getting redirected on. That's what happened there. So, but again, correcting the dog, delayed, waiting, until cherry picking certain moments. And again, I use the example, what's balanced dog training represent? It's a parent who's not dialed into the relationship the right way, right? It's not taking all the information and putting it all together, say, I'm dealing with a relationship problem. And then they're waiting for the child to already go into the toy aisle and pulling the toys down on the heads of the other kids. Oh, now the obvious, right? The obvious, now I'm gonna jump in. And what's the problem with that? Well, you're not invested, you're not dialed in, not dealing with the selfishness, the stinking thing, you're not engaged, right? You're not in the child's airspace. Because understand something here, when you see, and this is where, and think about this, if I out here in my neighborhood, if I'm watching the dog owner with a retractable leash, letting that dog walk 30 feet in front of them, do you think that's the only moment that's happening throughout the relationship? I mean, we're creatures of habit. We are how we think. There's going to be 100 other things going on. This all plays into getting people thinking the right way. But again, the selfish child example, pulling the toys down on the heads of the other kids and then jumping in, well, you're going to be in more conflict. It's not going to make sense. You know, it's like you're just waiting. No, you want to be dialed in. You want to be engaged. You know, intercept, right? So here, again, this goes into the thing about remote collars. You know, I had this conversation. Why can't you get the remote collars off these dogs, right? Because the role influence is not being dialed in the right way. And then the dogs will take the pain, they'll push through to get to the other side. I've seen these situations. And then the more stressed on certain dogs, you're gonna bring stress loads onto that dog too, right? You gotta get that collar off the dog. You bring the right method online to make sense to get faded in the right way. So here, going back now, focusing on the interaction-based thing again, the core ingredients: influence, you know, control, influence, right? Part of the interaction base. So they're brought in that way. Through, again, talk about pushing on, right? We talk about pushing. It's not about being super forceful, but you see, because understand that even when I'm bringing influence onto the dog, okay, you know, even the intent of that, okay, it's how you're pushing, okay? And I describe it like the tug of war team, the role of influence. The tug of war team, if you've ever seen the two tug of war teams, you know, engaged in pulling, and there's one team, they'll see them start to buckle. Okay, at a certain point, say, okay, the legs of that front guy are shaking. Okay, and that's shaking. So think about that. When I talk about the mini tremor, like when you're again bringing influence through the leash, and I'm locked in a certain way, and what'll happen is the mind of the dog will start to buckle, and then the agreeableness happens, and the dog moves forward. Okay, understand? So it plays in that way. It's about going deeper, right? It's not about physical force. Because I'll even get into, you know, when I'm talking about even in terms of bringing a dog into a down, okay, the down isn't the be all and end all. It's like you want to start to put that, you know, start to bring that into your toolbox at a certain point and start, but you're leaning in with your body. You're just leaning in, okay? You're not, because as soon as your elbow bends and you start to push, now it's personal, okay? Really, think about it. Like now you're like physical force. It's all technique, okay? This is about just the role of influence. You want to be in that dog's head. You want the dog to come into agreement with that little buckling, right? So there's that. So again, pushing, I'm asserting, right? And again, part of I talk about the little nudging, right? That's the intercepting part, and interrupting, right? Intercepting, interrupting. So the role of influence, the dog understands the intent. So when you're doing it, because again, you engage the level of stinking thinking. You're not doing it in a way to say the dog can never meet another dog. Okay, understand, it's just done in a way that's just like you're breaking that connection. The dog understands that, and it generates focus onto you. So it's conditional. It's like at a certain point, you're fading in at a certain level, and then what happens is you'll see it. Okay, as the dog starts that level of because what you're dialed into the level of intensity, right? You'll see, you know, if you pay attention, that dog is like, it's always like a few moments away from being fully expressed, fully invested in a way that control is really manifesting. So you're not like a balanced trainer where you're cranking, you're bringing a correction online. You're dialed in so that as you're, say, doing your walk down the street, that dog's head's starting to turn towards, I'm tapping a little bit. Because I want the focus on me. Doesn't have to be looking up my eyes, but you see that head turn in. So, but again, understand that through the system, right, you've got to be, you know, to affirm everything I'm saying, okay? To confirm, affirm everything I'm saying, you've got to be working it, okay? I mean, this is the thing about going through these videos. It's going to be very helpful, but you have to put that you know, practical piece in play, okay? And it can take some time, you know, because especially if you're coming out of this idea of things, okay? It's like you got to not just learn the system, but you got to deprogram from this. And that can be a really hard thing for people because I understand the challenges with that. You know, there's one lady I remember I was helping. I had a session with her. She's dealing with a very challenging situation, and it was one of the just handfuls of times I had to walk away. You know, I came for the second session, and she met me at the door, saying, "Well, Dave, let's let you know I'm doing clicker training now, and I want to incorporate that." And I said, "That's not going to work." And I said in a very nice way, but then I had to back out of it. I said, well, you know, good luck with your dog, but I'd like to help you, but you can't bring that in, okay? Because again, the core ingredients have to come through in a very intentional way, come through the right way. And so to see people, you know, fail, but understand, no, there is truth here. There's a complete system. There's a standard, okay? And those certain elements here don't change, okay? They have to come in. The integrity of it has to be there. So there's pushing, interrupting, intercepting. Okay, that's part of it. That's what you're doing. You know, again, breaking that connection. Okay, How the dog is, again, investing, connecting, the intensity of that. And that's the thing you pick up too. There's people say, well, how do you determine the levels? Well, it comes through, again, stepping into the relationship problem the right way. Okay, with those core ingredients, the leash, that's how you get the right information. That's how change happens. That's how you get able to establish, as change is happening as well. That's your litmus test. Understand that you have to work off of that. The integrity of that has to be such that that's going to give you the right information, be able to make the right decisions as to a process in terms of structure even, all of it. Okay, so that's the only way it comes through. If your dog's off leash, you're doing other things, you're not going to get it. You're going to be assuming things aren't true. Those core ingredients have to be there. So seeing things as a supply source, okay? Again, intent. The dog understanding the intent. And what happens is the focus shifts. So the dog, you'll see it. Dog's focus starts to change. And so I've made a note here about personal space. So this is where, again, even in terms of positioning, you see the dog right beside me. It's like the shadow coming over the dog. Dogs don't want to be right there for a reason. They want to be out in front, trying to move. So even if the dog's trying to move away from me, I'm not moving. Okay? That's an opportunity lost. If I move to the dog, moved over, the dog's moving there because that aspect of intentional control, the dog is starting, that power play starting to happen. The dog is starting to shift position on you. Don't be moving to the dog. You're the pillar. Okay? Just like maintain your ground. Doesn't mean you're necessarily forcing the dog over, asserting influence on the dog right away or anything, but it's like that line's got to be drawn. That's the thing. So a personal space, just like having a conversation. Think of the difference between, because this is all part of influence. The relationship part of it. The type of kind of interactions or interpersonal, dialogue and interaction between parent and child. The difference between standing back 50 feet, having a conversation with a child about something they did, and then, or coming in, like really having, right? Changes, right? Think about that. Doesn't mean you're threatening the child. It means that it changes, right? That dynamic. It's like control, influence, right? Parental influence. It's the same thing. Dogs, social animals, you'll see it. So it's important that the integrity of that lines up. In close proximity, that's influence. Bring dog under intentional control, influence. And again, you see it through the board and train process as I'm doing it. So again, influence, okay, that's the proper definition. You'll hear words like correction, punishment, plays into certain tools, but influence by way of relationship, by way, again, of a interaction-based method. That's how it comes in at the right level, the right way, intercepting, interrupting, okay, versus change focus, right? You start to get into that, you got problems, okay, because it's appearance-based, okay, it lacks context, right? It's missing the core ingredients I talk about. So thanks for watching. Have a great day.